Local Legends, Writing Freedom.
The final chapter. Hayward stayed for a month of Sundays, and Charlotte couldn't bear thinking about him leaving again. The morning he left, she said, "Hey, you can stalk Tender for me as long as you like." "Charlotte, I'm beginning to think you like having me around," he teased. "I never thought I'd see the day. But first, I got work to finish in Missouri. Then I got to help my folks move out here." He hesitated, then said, "Charlotte, come with me." Charlotte looked out the window as if she hadn't heard him. "It'll take me over a year, Charlotte. You could get someone to watch the place, and then Ebenezer could take over till we got back. Won't you come?" "Do you think she's going to go?" She turned and looked at him. "I can't, hey? I don't want to leave. I worked my whole life for this. I belong here. I want to build up my horse stock, and I got apples to pick and things I got to do. Besides, there's something I've been thinking on for some time that I feel really strongly about." She knew she could tell Hay anything, but she wasn't sure how he'd react to this. "I registered to vote in Santa Cruz County. This election's in a few weeks, and I don't want to miss it. And the only reason that she was able to register to vote is because everybody thinks she's a man. At this time, women were not allowed to vote." Hayward stared at her and shook his head. "Charlotte, you'll be going against the law." "Hey, I know more about who to vote for than most. Women are citizens of this country just like you. They work hard and make decisions sound as a man's." "There's a lot of folks who don't agree." "There's a lot of men who don't agree," said Charlotte. Hayward grinned at her. "I ain't one of them," he said. "I just don't understand what you'll be proving if no one knows you're a woman." "I guess I'm proving that here I am, a member of this country that most folks respect. Most of them ask me who I'm voting for, and the only reason I can walk in and vote is because they think I'm a man. Sooner or later, they'll all know I was a woman, and my point will be made." "So someday, you're going to let people know you're a lady?" he asked. "Maybe. But whether I let them know or not, I'll be wearing these same clothes and tending my horses and running this ranch, same as always." He considered what she said and shook his head. "You know your mind, Charlotte, and that's fine by me. You know how I feel about you." "I know," said Charlotte. He gave her a big hug and acted like he was never going to let go. Then he got on his horse and rode down the lane past the corral. Charlotte stood on the porch and watched him ride away. He stopped halfway down the road and waved his hat. Charlotte waved back. He put his hat back on and cupped his hands around his mouth. "I'll be back," he hollered. "I know," said Charlotte. It was sprinkling when Charlotte rode into town that November afternoon, but a little rain couldn't stop her. She hoped it wouldn't stop other folks from getting out and doing what they had to do either. Luckily, by the time she got to town, the sun had come out. She hitched the Mustang and walked down the street and nodded to the people walking by. A big sign in the window of the hotel said, "Polls, this is the voting booth." Some of the ladies in town went about their errands and didn't seem to give a second thought to the long line of men in front of the hotel. Others gathered out front in twos and threes, waiting for their menfolk, and acted like there was nothing special going on inside. Charlotte wondered if they really didn't care, or if they were going about playing their roles like she was playing hers. One man came up and clapped her on the back. "Good to see you, Charlie," he said. Some historians think that this is where Charlotte voted in 1868. It used to be called Tom Mann's Hotel, but now what stands at that spot is the Soquel Fire Station, and this plaque on the left talks about Charlotte Parkhurst voting here. It says the first ballot by a woman in an American presidential election was cast on this site, November 3rd, 1868, by Charlotte Charlie Parkhurst, who masqueraded as a man most of her life. She was a stagecoach driver in the Motherlode country during the gold rush days and shot and killed at least one bandit. In her later years, she drove a stagecoach in this area. She died in 1879. Not until then was she found out to be a woman. She is buried in Watsonville. Another man said, "Pretty exciting day, ain't it, Charlie?" Charlotte didn't say much. She shook hands all around and got in line with the men. She listened to them banter and joke around her. Heard Wyoming's going to give women the right to vote. I thought I'd heard everything. What's this country coming to? What do you think, Charlie? Charlotte said, I don't think it hurts nothing. Guess they know their minds as well as us. Don't hurt nothing. Them women fighting for this is just plain crazy, stirring up trouble all over. They'll be the ruination of this country. I told my wife that she would never be voting as long as she's married to me, no matter what the law says. What does she know about politics? Several other men added their opinions. The line inched up the hotel steps. A little boy ran up, found his father in line, and tugged on his hand. Papa, Papa, the Taylor boy said Sarah and I can't play ball because I'm little and she's a girl. And she's fighting him in the street and he's twice as big as her. Hurry, Papa. The father shook his head. We told her about fighting. When's that girl gonna learn? The men chuckled and the father and the little boy left. The line moved closer to the desk. Charlotte got to the front and signed the book. The registrar handed her the ballot. She studied the names, Horatio Seymour or Ulysses S. Grant, the conservative Democrat or the much-talked-about Republican. She had listened to the talk and heard people's debates. She had heard good things and bad things about both the men, but she knew her own mind and what she thought was right. You know who you're voting for, Charlie? Asked the man next to her. Yes, I do, said Charlotte. Old Jake couldn't make it today because he's ailing. Felt real bad about not coming, but I told him one vote won't make no difference. Charlotte nodded to the man. Would her one vote make a difference? Why was she doing this? Someday when people found out, would they just think that she had been crazy too? Or would they wonder that she had a good reason? Yes, she told herself, she had a good reason. This was something she could do for the woman who stood up in front of all those laughing men and passed out handbills on the saloon steps. Something for those women out front who were pretending they didn't mind that they couldn't vote. For Vern, who hadn't been allowed to speak up and should have been able to. And for that little girl outside who was already standing up for herself. She smiled. And for me, she thought, because I'm as qualified as any man. Amen, Charlotte. She marked her choice for President of the United States. She turned in her ballot, then faced the crowd of men still waiting in line. She tipped her hat. Gentlemen, she said, may the best man win. Then she walked out of the hotel, got on her horse, and rode home. Ebenezer arrived in the spring, just before the foal. He surveyed the property and grumbled about all the things that should be done. The pasture fence needed mending and the chickens needed a new coop. Margaret needed help selling the eggs in town. Charlotte was tickled because she figured all his belly aching meant that he'd come to stay. And the foal? It came in the middle of the night, in the middle of a thunderstorm. It gave Charlotte fits and worries because it was breech, trying to come out the wrong way. She coaxed as best she knew, but when she was afraid they'd both be lost, she woke up Ebenezer. The two sat up all night soothing the mother horse, who was as frightened by the thunder as she was by the birthing. While Ebenezer tried to deliver the foal, Charlotte paced like an expectant father. Her mind was on the night she sat up with freedom. And she was remembering Vern. If he were here, he'd be telling her to settle down. That Ebenezer knew what he was doing. Vern had been right about so many things. But Charlotte needn't have worried. By the time the rooster crowed, a wet, folded-up bundle of legs was delivered. A filly. That's a baby girl horse. Oh. The baby horse barely stood on her wobbly legs when Ebenezer said, "There's another one coming. It's twins!" And in a few frantic minutes, a colt stood next to his sister. "What are you going to name them?" asked Ebenezer. "You should call them Worry and Trouble for the night they gave us." And then he laughed. But Charlotte got quiet and serious like, "Naming is something important," she said, "and a name should stand for something. A horse's name should be fitting for a fine animal." She watched the foals and didn't say anything. The mare licked the colt and the filly started nursing. And after she'd considered them for some time, Charlotte crossed her arms and nodded her head with a knowing smile. It had come to her. "Well, you gonna keep it to yourself?" said Ebenezer. Charlotte was right proud to explain her reasoning behind it all. And when she was finished, Ebenezer had to agree. They were fine names, important names that stood for something and were fitting for fine animals. She named the colt Vern's Thunder, and she named the filly Freedom. I definitely did not teach you about very many people in these final 2 months of school, but I did teach you a lot about one specific, very special local legend. I love the book Writing Freedom, and I hope you enjoyed it too. This is Pioneer Cemetery in Watsonville, where Charlie Parkhurst is buried. This cemetery is near where her ranch was on what is now Freedom Boulevard. I really hope that someday you get to go see the plaque at Soquel Firehouse and see Charlie Parkhurst's grave. What an epic life.